Welcome to Focus on Business, a podcast show for photographers with me, your host, Jane Goodrich. I'm talking to successful photographers so you can learn from our experiences and have the business of your dreams. So join us and let's focus on business. Welcome to today's episode of Focus on Business. And today we have the fantastic Alaina Nuñez. She's a fantastic birth photographer based in California, and she also educates on birth photography. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking myself. I'm going to turn it over a little bit so Alaina can actually tell us a little bit about herself. Just tell us who you are, about your business. I briefly mentioned it in the introduction, but what type of photography you do.
My name is Alaina Nuñez. I'm a homeschool mom of 6. And I guess being a mom is kind of how I started in my photography journey. Well, not really the journey, but how I started in business journey of photography. And I've been a birth photographer for over 10 years now, full-time photographer for about 4. Yeah, I love families and babies, but I just feel like my soul thrives in the birthing space. So, yeah, that's what I do. And I also just recently started educating other photographers who are interested in birth photography because I was seeing a lot of people wanting to jump into that, but then not knowing etiquette of birth and just wanting to help others not make the same mistakes or take as long to learn as I did.
I think that that's a really interesting point of how you seeing other photographers struggle with the same mistakes or learning curves that you have and just wanting to actually shorten that for others. Basically, here's what I learned, and you don't have to make the same mistakes, which is amazing, especially with birth, because it is so, one, important, but there are a lot of nuances within just photographing a live birth. So one question I have is, do you also do any other types of photography, or is it solely focusing on birth photography?
I still do families and newborns. I have my families that come back to me every year. I do small events, small quinceañeras or small like backyard weddings, as long as I'm not on call at that time.
Yeah.
I would just put too much stress on the whole situation that I don't want to deal with. So, but yeah, I love doing that. I feel like being able to do other type of storytelling, like with newborn, I do a lot of posing during newborn, which is where I got kind of my foundation in my business journey, was learning how to pose people, because it was like I started out going, okay, yeah, just, act normal. And most people don't know how to relax in front of the camera when they're getting their portrait taken. And so you really do have to learn how to direct them without them feeling, school portrait with their head all tweaked out.
I mean, as a photographer, I think I am probably the worst subject for somebody. I cannot relax in front of a camera. Luckily, I have some very good photographer friends that I've tortured by having them take my headshots. But I can't take self-portraits. You need the experienced photographer to bring out, to
Mhm.
relax you. And in those situations of birth photography, you're telling the story, but not posing in a way, but sort of moving yourself to get the right pose almost. Because, I mean, if her mom is in labor, she's not going to be, hey, I'm going to do some
Right.
posing here. So that's
Exactly.
that's interesting to make sure that you're capturing that moment in a beautiful way, that's storytelling as well. I like to ask this question. So, why photography? I mean, I know, well, that's a very broad subject. People love photography as a hobby, but what made you think I could do this as a living? Is there anything that, oh, I really could do this? What gives you that power to sort of think, oh, I'm going to do this instead of anything else in life that you could be doing?
In college, I actually got my music education degree.
Nice. The guitar behind
Because,
you.
yeah, wish I don't play that well, but my goal when I was finishing school was, what can I do as a mom that I can make my own schedule and still be present? Because I did know that I wanted to be able to homeschool my kids as well. And so when I graduated, I was almost due with my second child. So I got my music education degree, and then I realized I didn't want to do that for
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. I've always loved photography. I was always the family photographer. I shot both my brother's weddings with my film
Mhm.
camera. I took photography in high school at college and it's just I went back to that. You know what? I feel like I could do this all the time. When I had kids, I was kind of I wish somebody would come to my home and do pictures for me, like newborn pictures and those kind of things, because I was doing that for my own kids. And I was like, you know what? I bet other moms would want this too. And so that's kind of what jumped me into doing that, not knowing any of the back end stuff or how to
Mhm.
actually run a successful business. So yeah.
I think that's where we all start. Oh, this looks easy. Well, so that leads me to another question. If you had the chance to time travel back in time when you were first starting, would you change anything? Would you do anything differently about how you started your business? Or you're like, "Oh, I kind of like how it went."
I feel like our journey is necessary to become who we're supposed to be.
Hmm.
But if I were to change anything, I would have found a mentor that
Yeah.
would have just kind of laid out these are the next steps to take or help me set my goals. Because if you don't have any goals, you're just going to be spinning and feeling like you're not going anywhere. And then when you finally reach those milestones, you're not going to realize it because you never set those goals in the first
Right. And you're
place.
not going to really be able to celebrate that. I have a little bit of a different story. So I did an MBA. I have a business degree. So I was definitely in the finance side and planning my business. And I did all that side.
Yeah.
But the personal side, it sounds like you went into it having, I want this because I want my work life balance. So you had the boundaries. Whereas my biggest mistake was, oh, yeah, I'll photograph anybody, anytime, anywhere, this, that, and the other. And I didn't have a life. So for me, one of my things I would change would be having a little bit more of a routine and a schedule and the why behind it versus I am doing this. So I have the freedom, but as I started 2, 3 years in, I'm like, "What freedom do I have?" I'm giving them my schedule, I'm giving them everything, and as soon as I started with the boundaries of, "No, I'm not working." I did actually take the birth of my daughter to be like, "No, I'm not working 24/7." That's sort of where I felt short, and I would love people to be, "No, you don't have to work weekends. If you don't want to, or if you're juggling, you can just work weekends. You don't have to just work during the week." So it is a beautiful career business to have because you can set your own goals, you can set your own hours, but you have
Mhm.
to be firm with them. And that's
Yeah.
what I wasn't. So this question I have is interesting is if you were to move, if you had to say, okay, I'm not in California, I'm gonna go, I have to move to, I don't know, making it up, New York, where I am. Like, what's the number one thing that you think you would do to ensure a seamless transition for your business?
Because birth is so personal and intimate, I think I would try to make as many connections with the birth community, midwives, ultrasound centers, birthing centers, that kind of thing, other doulas, other birth photographers, because backups are important. Yeah. So I would definitely just make those personal connections and that would probably be the very first thing. And the next thing, working on my website to fix SEO stuff so that
Yeah.
I show up over there instead of over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. So I like that the first thing that you would do is be offline. In person, it is building the connections because I think people buy from people and it's also such a personal interaction. I don't do birth, although actually, you know what? I realized I did. I photographed my sister's 3 children. I realized that after we spoke the other day. I did
Yay.
photograph birth. I did. I loved it. Such a beautiful thing, but I just couldn't for anybody else because she was shouting at me. So I was like, I don't think I can do that. But I love the fact that you say that it's the personal connections. We are a service-based business. And so it's very easy. And yes, don't get me wrong, social media is great, website's great, but in person, there are so many photographers that I know in my area that don't even have a website because they've established themselves and it's all networking. And I hate that word. I really do. I have a fear of that word. I just don't like it because I think I'm not networking. I'm not a networker. What I call it is making business friends. I can help you. For me, I'm a newborn and family photographer. So mine is where do moms go? Where do pregnant moms go?
And I can also help someone else's business. I can help that lactation consultant. I can help the music studio with their business and vice versa. And then you end up with this great friendship of small businesses. I love the fact that
Yeah.
you mentioned that. And this leads kind of me onto something which I might already have the answer to. So, what is your favorite form of marketing? And marketing is huge. We see in groups and everything, oh, I'm posting to social media. That is 10% of what marketing is involved. So, what is your favorite form of marketing? Is it in
Um,
person, making the relationships with people? Is it blogging, being on
yeah,
Instagram?
Instagram is kind of that love-hate relationship.
I use
I've met,
Instagram for awareness. That's all I do. Awareness,
yeah,
it's not bringing me sales. It's just so people still know I'm photographing and that's it. I'm not the best at Instagram.
I use Instagram actually to make connections and
Smart.
then set up in-person meetings and things like that, or Zoom meetings if our schedules are just crazy. But I mean, going to meet for coffee, going to have lunch together, that's a business meeting. And who doesn't like doing that? Like
Yeah.
FaceTime, actual
Yeah.
FaceTime.
I think we're sort of seeing a rebound in the pandemic. Everyone's like, yeah, this is great. We can all do this online learning and connections and everything. And it's just, can I have a
Yeah.
coffee with you or tea? I drink tea.
Yeah.
Lunch, just the physicality of learning more, a little bit more about that person. I 100% agree.
Not like you have as much time constraints either. Like when you're
Yeah.
online, you're kind of, this is all I got. But when you're in person, maybe you
Yeah.
still have a time constraint, but it doesn't feel like it as much.
It feels more, well, obviously, Jane, personal, but because it's in person, like state the obvious, because you just get to know the person as a person. You'll
Yeah.
end up chatting about their kids or anything like that, or like, oh, where's the best lunch spot around here? You'll just end up having a friend. That's why I say
Yeah.
it's making business friends. Or some of my
Totally.
best friends, I had reached out to them via old school email, but they've been like the best friends I've had and supportive when I'm struggling with something and great referrals back and forth. And at the end of the day, it's a really good friend. And so who
Yeah.
doesn't need more friends? Right?
Exactly.
Never have too many friends. So one of the things, just for if you're a newer photographer and you feel like you have to do it all, you don't. So with photography, and maybe not so much birth because of the time it takes, but on average, if you have a family shoot, there's between 9 and 12 hours of back end work. And that doesn't mean just editing. That means marketing, updating the website, doing your taxes, responding to inquiries, doing social media, all of the stuff. So that's why we have to take into account your time. Alternatively, you can outsource some of that and do
Mm.
more shoots. So, are there any things that you outsource or recommend outsourcing if you could outsource something? Or you're, hey, Jane, I love doing all of it. Or you don't love
um,
doing it. Or your prices don't. You need to raise your prices too in order to outsource. That's okay too.
so I've kind of outsourced my taxes, my bookkeeping, just stuff that was not bringing me joy.
Yes.
But things that were necessary.
Yeah.
I've also outsourced some of the blogging parts, making it cohesive or adding photos to things or just like
Yeah.
that extra stuff that I can pay somebody to do this. And
Yeah.
then I don't have to sit here and second guess, what should I use this picture? Should I use that picture? Sometimes it's just nice to have somebody else just go, oh, this one's nice and put it in without
Yeah.
that emotional connection.
Oh, for sure. Well, speaking of emotional connections with images, it's like culling. Find
Yeah.
culling is one of the things for me. I actually ended up calling a friend. She was a wedding photographer. She got very sick and she was very stressed. I was just let me call. Just really, really let me call. Calling somebody else's images versus mine, completely different. You're just going in the technicality and the emotions and then done versus me. I'm like, oh, but that little kid, he was doing this at the time and this and this and this. And then I'll end up with 5,000 images and the clients will be overwhelmed. So my first thing I outsource, which I always recommend, is taxes and accounting. It's a cost that where they will save you. There'll be some loophole in the law or those sales taxes change that they are obligated to tell you about, and you can't keep
Mhm.
up. We're not accountants. So that's the number one thing I say. And also they'll give you advice too. By the way, your numbers are XYZ, or by the way, this is the time, Jane, you should really buy a camera before we close these this year because it will help your taxes. Oh, fine, I'll buy a new camera. Or he'll say, why are your sales? Like it's another business advice person.
Yeah.
I've outsourced culling before, especially when I get busy, and also editing for me. With newborn photography, as you know, the skin tones with babies can be yellow or red or slightly off, or a lot of baby poop or baby acne. And I just can't stare at the screen that long. So someone else is better at it than me. They're trained in my editing style. Goodbye. I will
Perfect.
rather photograph another baby. We've had this conversation before. I find it really fascinating. So a birth photography, I have to be on call. What we said, 4 weeks, sort of given around the due date. How do you balance that? How do you create that work-life balance? Homeschool mom of 6 children, hats off to you. Bravo. I have 1 child and I don't homeschool, and it's a lot. So wow. How have you found a way that can work? Is there a number of shoots that you do a month? How do you manage that?
I think it goes well. This like impromptu schedule goes well with my personality. As I've had more kids and as my business has grown, I've had to schedule things to make sure stuff gets done. But then I always love having space. I call them empty squares when like I don't have anything to do that day on my calendar. I celebrate empty squares. I'm like,
Yeah, as
kids, there's
you
an empty
should.
square today. Having that space to be able to just say, you know what, we're going to go do school at the beach today, or we're going to go do this, or this was the plan, but maybe my child's struggling with something. And so we're going to redirect. And I think that's kind of how birth works
Mm,
is it's normal within this broad range. So I can say, oh, a mom might be in early labor. And so even my kids now are kind of like, so you'll probably leave either tonight or tomorrow morning, you
mhm.
know?
So they know. And then you've obviously a support system to be able to do this. Because I think that's one of the keys
Mhm.
for birth is having a support system. Like you said, a backup photographer, but do you have grandparents or a best friend or partner? If you're a single mom in the middle of nowhere with no backups, it might not be at this time the right
Right.
place for you. Or you could actually be a backup for somebody else and learn it that way if you're
Mhm.
available. We always say, oh, that's a red flag. And sometimes I think we use it too frequently about assessing a client. What irks me is when people say a red flag is when someone asks for a discount. I actually disagree because I think some cultures, it's actually normal to ask, is that the best price? It's just a cultural thing. Don't take it personally. This is your
Mhm.
price. They're just asking a question.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are some things that you've learned along the way that that client might not be the right fit for you. Do you have
Mhm.
any of those?
When they want to micromanage a lot of stuff. And
Mhm,
so that means there's the lack of trust. And that also makes me feel like there's going to be discontentment at the end when I deliver
mhm.
anything video, film, or photographs. That just, oh, I wish you would have got this. Or, and I always say birth is there's so many variables to it. And
So many variables.
even within portrait photography,
Mhm.
it's just if the parents doesn't feel confident in your work as an artist, as a professional, then they're going to be harder to please. And
Yeah.
so I'm probably not the right person for that.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I mean, I have a couple of initial red flags is how someone emails and they demand me to be at a certain location at a certain time and it's not an event. It's just like, okay, hang on. Hi. So,
Yeah, you're
how
right.
are you? I like your work. That would be great. It was interesting that you mentioned trust. I'm very lucky and I've built my business this way to have a lot of repeat clients. And as a family photographer, the fall is crazy. And so the first year my daughter was born was 2015, I'd had a few new clients that ended up on my schedule. And the difference between the new clients that we haven't formed that trust yet, or they're nagging me about like, let me look at the back of the camera. And I was just sort of vowed, I was like, you know what, when I'm busy and it's the busy season, I'm not doing any new clients. I'm not. I feel like I have to prove myself a little bit, even if they rave about my work. There's a little bit of element of I can't be free to just shoot. And I've had people book me in February to get on my full calendar. It's actually great. I'm like, what? Okay, let's do an in-home session in February when I'm slow. I'll do it. And I also want to make sure that my repeat clients get on my schedule. So it's a little bit of both, and they become my family. So during a busy time when I'm away more from my family, I'm still seeing my family. So one question that I have, and it's probably the last one, and this can be for a photographer that's starting out in birth or any photographer, if you have one tip that you would give them to be like, all right, I just want to sit down. I want to tell you this one thing that I really hope that you take away from either this conversation, or say you had your friend's daughter comes to you and like, I want to be a photographer. What would you tell them?
Do it.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
say do
good.
it because I feel like I was discouraged from it when I first initially mentioned it. I think in high school, I was like, oh, I could be a photojournalist. And that's what I wanted to do actually before I graduated. And I wanted to go in the mission field and be a photojournalist and
Wow.
tell true stories. And look where I am. I'm
Yeah.
basically
So
doing that, right?
do it. So definitely just do it. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that tip. Tell everyone listening or watching where they can find you. We'll put it in the show notes too, but sometimes it's good to, and what you have going on. I know you have a workshop coming up, and she does workshops each year. She's amazing. So if you're into birth photography, definitely check out Alaina. She's amazing.
So my website is alainanuñez.com. And then my birth workshop is thebirthphotographyworkshop.com. And it has the workshop information on there and mentoring information as well.
Yeah, she's a fantastic mentor, and I love your energy. Every time we talk, I'm like calm. I know why people hire you. I just think you're amazing.